Day 2 of the Continental RPM adventure, and we'd swap the grit, dust and mud of our 4x4 route for the twists and turns of a racing circuit with a fleet of performance cars to match.
The Eastern Cape isn't only home to Continental Tyre, but it's also the location of the Scribante racing circuit.
We've had our off-road fun, and now it's time for some track fun in a whole range of cars, from the small Fiat 500 Abarth SS to the Chrysler 300C SRT8.
A total of 14 sporty machines was assembled in the Scribante pit lane, but before our guests were allowed out onto the track, a safety briefing and several sighting laps ensured that even novices were soon familiar with the tricky little circuit. Qualified instructors also ensured that ideal lines were followed and the best extracted from the cars at all times. As always, safety remained of paramount importance.
The Alfa Romeo Mito is a car with which we're very familiar here at RPM. We had one as part of our long-term test fleet last year. Although the Mito was primarily designed as a city car, this Quadrifoglio Verdi version has performance at the front of its mind rather than fuel consumption. It's a car that just wants to be driven hard, and when you do what it wants, it becomes a lot of fun. At Scribante, its combination of composed handling and ample urge impressed. Also on the compact side of the hatchback scale is the Audi A1 Sportback, but with lots of oomph from its 1400cc turbo engine, this tiny tot has a big heart. The smallest Audi is a car that gets more and more impressive with each subsequent model I drive. As part of our adventure, we've got the top-of-the-line 1.4 TFSI with 136 kilowatts and 250 newton meters. 0 to 100 time, 6.9 seconds, top speed 227. But even those stats understate what is a dynamically satisfying car.
At the other end of the size scale, the Audi S7 Sportback is a generously proportioned machine, but one where sleek beats bulk with a generous dash of sophistication too.
If you like your performance cars understated, then the Audi S7 might just be the right candidate. At face value, it looks more like a wafter than a performance machine. But put it on the track, give it some wheelie, and trust me, you'll be surprised about how quick this car really is.
And with Quattro drive, the muscle is matched to plenty of grip too.
The new generation F30 BMW 3 Series is the most generic model range in the Bavarian makers lineup, but there's nothing remotely generic about the 335iM. My first impression of the new BMW 3 Series wasn't a good one. I drove the 328i, which is technically a very impressive car, but somehow doesn't grab you the same way that a lot of BMW cars can. This, though, is a different story entirely. 225 kilowatts, 400 newton meters, and handling on rails makes for true sports sedan appeal.
In this age of eco-friendly designs and small-capacity turbo engines, it's great to see that the American muscle car is still alive and well. The Chrysler 300C SRT8 looks and sounds the part.
It also goes like the clappers, although you need to switch the chassis to the tauter SRT mode to address the otherwise wallowy ride quality and expect to attract attention wherever you go. The diminutive Fiat 500 Abarth SS looks small enough to fit in the big Chrysler's boot, but don't be fooled by the tiny Italian's toy-like demeanor.
Abarth is the performance arm of Fiat, and it uses a scorpion as its mascot, which seems to indicate that it might have a bit of a sting in its tail. Now, the little Fiat 500 Abarth is already a pretty quick car, but in SS form, it is a true pocket rocket.
118 kilowatt allows a 7.4 second 0 to 100 time and a 211 kilometers an hour top speed, but at 267,000 rand it's also pricey.
For a long time, Subaru owners in South Africa have had it far too easy, with an almost complete lack of presence of their arch nemesis, the Evo. But that's all about to change thanks to Mitsubishi South Africa importing the latest generation Lancer Evo 10. And if you want to experience the car, you need to start with a 700,000 Rand check. But if you really want to experience the car, you need a racetrack.
The car that felt closest to a hardcore sports machine in our RPM adventure fleet was the Nissan 370Z.
At Nissan, the sports car thunder is often stolen by the GTR, but when it comes to looks and driver involvement, this car is not far behind. The 370Z has got that lusty V6 engine, and trust me, if you give it stick, it will be a rewarding drive. The Opel Astra GTC looks a lot more dynamic than the normal 5-door version, and it has the sporty road manners to match. But a chassis as good as this one really needs a lot more power, and so we'll probably have to wait for the OPC version.
Still, the standard GTC shows its class in the twisties.
One of the unexpected stars of this Grabante track session came from the Peugeot stable. First shown as a concept in 2007, the Peugeot RCZ proved to be such a hit that they put it into production the very next year. It may not have made the dent in TT sales that local dealers would have wanted, but it's still a fantastic thing to look at. And thanks to a 1600 turbo with 147 kilowatts, it's pretty good to drive too.
Renault produces some of the world's best hot hatches, and the Clio RS is no exception. This one is even more special though.
If you follow Formula One racing, you'll know that Renault and Red Bull have a close relationship, and in fact, it looks like Sebastian Vettel is going to win this year's championship for Renault Red Bull Racing. The Clio might not be as expensive or as technologically advanced as a Formula One car, but one thing it can do that Sebastian Vettel's car can't is drive in normal road conditions, and do so very rapidly indeed.
And here's another Renault with performance written all over it. If there's one car that's indisputably the king of its class, it's this one, the Renault Megane RS. Thanks to a recent power upgrade, its 2-litre turbo motor now puts out 195 kilowatts and 360 newton meters. Add to that a limited slip diff, and you've got a car that is unbelievable on the road, but even better on a track.
Specialist small car maker Suzuki builds some giant-killing cars. The Swift Sport isn't the quickest, but it's still a grin machine.
It's easy to underestimate the Suzuki Swift Sport. It doesn't look particularly aggressive, and if you look at the specs, you'll see that it doesn't have that much power either. But the magic of this car is all in the chassis, and at a racetrack like this, you get the feeling of a go-kart every time you drive it.
In fact, the Swift Sport proves that handling is what matters most.
The car of the previous century has already had one resurrection, although the reception was rather lukewarm. Now in its third generation, this new VW Beetle has thankfully moved away from the rather forgettable styling of the previous one. But it's also moved away from its label as the people's car. This 1.4 TFSI Sport costs just under 300,000 Rand. At least the Sport badge isn't just an empty promise. This Beetle is frisky. It's been 2 days, 2 very different driving environments, but one hell of an adventure.
And the reason for that mainly is because we've had both on-road vehicles and off-road vehicles to evaluate.
As far as Continental RPM adventures go, this one's going to be tough to beat.
It's always a challenge, isn't there?
One adventure, 2 days, 14 performance cars, 16 off-roaders, 120 tyres, 2,000 litres of fuel. And we're already planning next year's Continental RPM adventure.